Hi, welcome to this session, Feel the Metaverse with spatial computing and haptic feedback. My name is Renee and I'm leading the spatial computing community of practice for Reply. And I'm also Innovation Director at Valorum Reply, as well as a Microsoft Regional Director and MVP for Mixed Reality and Quantum Computing, and also an advisor for the VR and AR Association, as well as the XR Bootcamp. Let's actually explain what is spatial computing. Well, first of all, a lot of folks got their first personal computers in the 1990s or so, and that really changed the game once they became connected through the internet with each other. And that happened quite soonish, and then Web 2.0 came along, and it really democratized knowledge sharing, and it changed a lot how we communicate as humans with each other, right? And then after personal computing, mobile computing came along, which really made computing mobile. So we didn't have the big boxes under the desk. We had them now in our pocket, and more computing power in these devices today than we had back then with personal computing, the first wave at least. And so mobile computing doesn't just bring these powerful computing devices in our pockets, but also a lot of contextual information, because these devices have sensors built in, right? So I can, for example, use the GPS, the geopositioning sensor, with maps, and then I know where I am, and I can get contextual information, where I'm going, or what is some of the stuff I could do there. And so basically, after personal computing and mobile computing, we are now entering the so-called spatial computing age, which is mainly driven by so-called intelligent edge devices. And this could be simply a smartphone, right? Because they have advanced sensor capabilities built in today where they can sense the world around us. Or it could be, of course, a dedicated device, a head-mounted device like the Microsoft HoloLens I have here, which has even more sensors built in, where it can sense the world around us. But even, certain VR devices like these here that have these cameras where they can also, track your environment. So in a sense, all of these devices, and the form factor doesn't matter really from the technology standpoint, they have one thing in common. They can all spatially sense the world around us. They can do spatial reconstruction, spatial mapping in the end, right? And so again, form factor doesn't really matter so much from the tech perspective. Of course, it matters a lot from the user experience, right? You will define a different experience for such an device that can show you augmented reality content like the HoloLens, which you wear on your head. If you would do it on the mobile, of course, you would do this quite differently from the user experience standpoint. But again, all of these have one thing in common, and that will be important later on. They can sense the world around us to a high degree thanks to computer vision and intelligent edge, right? Like computer vision that can sense the world around us to a high degree. And pretty much everyone already has such a device in their pocket, right? You can see it's around 2 billion devices, might be even more now, where people basically have either an iPhone or an Android device that has these advanced augmented reality capabilities already built in. And so everyone has it, just do it, right? And so let's talk about the Metaverse, actually. But I think two main important things are really relevant is the Metaverse is persistent and it's also device independent. So it doesn't have to be a VR and AR device that you need to have. You can also use it with desktop and web applications. So this is also an important part, device independence and persistence. Like if I put like this device in a virtual world on the table, it should still be there when I come back a week later, right? And so a lot of that is ongoing. But let me show you an overview of all the industry at the moment and the landscape, what we can see when it comes to Metaverse solutions. And so, as you can see here, there's a bunch of vendors on the market. And what you might also be able to see is written down here, it says blockchain, right? And on the top over there, it says no blockchain. And then we have here no VR, and on the other side of the coordinates, you can actually see it mentions VR. And so you can categorize these different platforms. And what you noticed is all the big platforms from the big players like Microsoft with Altspace or Meta, and you name them, they're all on the top, so they're all centralized. And on the bottom, you have a lot of startups that are working with decentralized platforms, and they are basically leveraging blockchain technology for asset transfer, right? So imagine you buy a virtual accessoire for your avatar, and the transaction will be happening as an NFT, as a non-fungible token. And so this is basically then stored on the blockchain that you bought this item for your avatar, right, with your decentralized identity. And so they are built on the blockchain premise. What you also might be able to see is there's so much, right? So it's not just the vision of one metaverse that is the vision that everyone is subscribing to, but we have this kind of a multiverse at the moment, right? And I'm really glad there's initiatives like the Metaverse Standards Forum, which I have a fancy, look at this, fancy PowerPoint 3D animation logo here. And this is the logo of the Metaverse Standards Forum. The Metaverse Standards Forum is mainly driven by the Cronus Group, which is famous for OpenGL, OpenXR, and other open standards. And they're now working on interoperability and other things that are very relevant to make an open metaverse and a standard, that everyone can use with their own platforms. And of course, Reply is also part of the Metaverse Standards Forum, but also all the big players, like all the folks you can see on the slide here, but even more, like you have Microsoft and all the big vendors are part of this. And I'm really excited about it because this is what we need to have, right? Under the hood, it could be multiple platforms, right? But on the top, from the user experience standpoint, we need to have this homogeneous kind of a metaverse. And it doesn't matter really if I'm using Microsoft's platform or a competitor's platform, right? They should all kind of openly exchange data with each other. And again, this is thanks to the Metaverse Standards Forum. This is being worked on quite intensively and very important. One example I'm going to pick out here is a Microsoft Altspace platform, which they acquired like 5 years ago or so. And it's really exciting because you can build these custom worlds. I'm going to show you an example in a minute. But you can also have these large public events, right? Like they did, for example, here at Ignite last year, where there was a presentation. You see all the people joined in VR and are represented as the avatars. They could join in VR, by the way, but they could also use a desktop app, right? So like I said, device independence is important. And so we can even see a gentleman there, the presenter, in a 3D video. And this is with holoportation, right? So instead of being everyone as an avatar, you can have certain folks, for example, being captured as a 3D volumetric video and then streamed real time into this solution. And so that you can have these really nice immersive presentations. If you're interested in this, reach out to us. We also have some good stuff when it comes to holoportation and can probably help you with this. And like I mentioned, you can also build these custom worlds in Altspace. Like what you can see here, for example, is the Reply Solar World recreated in Altspace. And the Reply Solar World is basically a recreation of a physical solar world. So in Reply offices across the globe, you have these social gathering spaces where colleagues can meet with each other. And this is really, really cool. And here you can have some, for example, some water cooler conversation. Now in the Metaverse with your distributed teams, we can also do presentations and so on. And we can build these. We can customize it for Altspace and other platforms as well, and are super well equipped for world building. Another interesting project we also did was an immersive gallery with NFTs, for example. So you can go to this immersive gallery, right, in the metaverse, and you can even have multiple folks join you, and so you can experience. And this was really useful during times where we could not physically meet with each other or go to museums, right? But it's still very useful, and you can actually take something with you at home, and you can actually get an NFT of one of these artwork as a digital art piece. And so you can connect the real with the physical world already to some degree. But let's switch gears and talk about enterprise metaverse and especially collaboration. And I'm going to show you a bunch of demo videos which we recorded as part of our experimentations with various metaverse collaboration platforms. And the platform doesn't really matter so much what you will see, but it's more important the kind of things you might notice.
Love it.
Nice. So you basically go ahead, Paulo.
Have you already integrated?
So have you seen this? Like where I said, like, hey, go ahead and go ahead with the talking, right? Like here you can see the hand when I'm reaching out and trying to interrupt. You saw this? Like I did like this. Oh, just continue talking, right? I don't want to interrupt you, just like you would do in a real physical meeting, right? And that's already giving you a hint. What you can see, I can also do screen sharing. I can bring in like Excel or other stuff and share this online so we can have a presentation. We had like 14 people joining with their VR headsets, but you can also bring in people that just joined via the browser. So really useful. And I can tell you, I remember much more from these meetings because, first of all, you have the full field of view, right? If you put this device on like this, you actually have a full field of vision. And look at this, we can even do high fives, like virtual high fives, thanks to the hand tracking, right? So very natural how you can use your hands as well. And like I said, I can remember much more from these meetings. Here's also Altspace. We also have this kind of collaboration space, of course, in Altspace, where we could, also do screen sharing. We could exchange information with each other, meet together, and a lot of interesting things, like just from the conversational things. But the most important part is you're fully immersed, right? Like you put on this device, there's no external distraction, so you're focused. And also, it's not just a small post-stamp online video kind of thing, right? You see in front of you, but full immersion. And that also helps you to remember things. And I can tell you, I remember much more from these immersive meetings than just normal online meetings, because our brain works spatially, right? Humans remember things better if you have a spatial surrounding. And with these solutions, we get spatial visuals, like 3D visuals, but also spatial sound, like three-dimensional sound, where we can remember much more. And of course, Mesh is coming, right? Mesh for Teams. And this is also super exciting because, like you see, like I wrote there, it's a gateway into the Metaverse, because it's bringing Metaverse experiences to the already 270 million monthly Teams users, right? And so we can go what the users are that are already using a collaboration platform. And now we can enable them with a more immersive mode, where they can use the avatar in 2D meetings, but also join these collaborative spaces. And again, we are super well equipped to build these worlds, and yeah, super exciting stuff when it's coming with Mesh for Teams, for sure. All right, let's talk about the real world Metaverse. And the real world Metaverse, you might wonder, what is this? Well, we talked about these devices, right? Like that can sense the world around us. Like easily it could be just a smartphone, right? So think about you're using a smartphone and I'm using my smartphone, and we scan certain portions of the world around us. If we do this and then combine it together, we get this kind of a digital twin of the real world, right? And if we now overlay this digital twin of the real world with the physical world, we get this kind of a real world Metaverse, right? Some also call it the mirror world or AR cloud or whatever. But this is really exciting because now we can connect the physical world with the virtual world in a much better way. And it's not just me that's being excited about it, but also, well, no one else than Satya Nadella, right? As he said in an interview, increasingly as we embed computing in the real world, you can even embed the real world into computing. And that's his idea of the Metaverse, and I fully subscribe to this because it makes a lot of sense, because otherwise it's just pure virtual world play, right? And so we got to bring in the physical world. And here's an example built with Microsoft Azure Spatial Anchors, where I positioned anchors in the real world Metaverse with Azure Spatial Anchors as an implementation of it. And as you can see, this is a video playing here. And if you look closely at the church towers over there, and when I walk around this historic portal, as I call it, you can actually see it looks quite different today, because this is my hometown in Dresden. And, after World War II, of course, it looked quite different. And so we can build these experiences and anchor these information in the real world. And the content doesn't really matter so much. So it could be a video, it could be a photo, it could be a 3D model, whatever it is. The key here is I can come with my device, scan the place a little bit, put this anchor with the content, and then you could come with your device, for example, like whatever it is, come to the same place, just scan it a little bit. It will recognize the location and will load the same information for you and visualize it. And I don't need GPS, so it works indoors, and I don't need any QR codes, AR markers, nothing like this is needed. The real world becomes your marker, and that is a very important point here. And Azure Spatial Anchors is the first and still the best technology to enable this. And you can even use it with robots. So if you take a look at this here, we're actually working quite closely with Boston Dynamics and the Spot robotic platform. And as you can see here, the Spot does 3D scanning, does environmental sensing, spatial mapping on its own. But now with the Azure Spatial Anchors ROS SDK, the robot operating system, we can now combine it and take the data from the device, from the robot, and merge it together with whatever it is, like a HoloLens, right? So they share the same spatial map, and now you can control the robot just like with a tap, right? I could do like this, oh, robot, go there, go this, and I don't need to remote control anymore. So super exciting because we can share the same spatial map. Another interesting use case is also for 3D scanning and visualization. And here you can see one of the Reply offices in Milan. And this is a 3D scan of it, which was done also with the robot. And you can see here when I point my cursor there, so here you can see the little purple cursor. So the robot stopped there, and it stopped over there, and it stopped over there. And so there were a multiple bunch of these stops where we did a 3D Leica laser scan and then merged all of this together. And what we get as a result is a huge point cloud with 1 billion points. And so this is very hard to visualize, but thanks to another Azure mixed reality service called Azure Mood Rendering, we can visualize this in 3D with the HoloLens. The HoloLens would not be able to render 1 billion points, right? But there's this new feature in Azure Mood Rendering with point cloud support where we can take the point cloud file directly, run it through the processing, and then it renders it remotely in one of the powerful Azure GPU machines, and then streams the result as a stereo video back to the HoloLens, and I can see it with real-time interactions and can visualize this huge amount of data, which I would not be able otherwise. Last point here, let's talk about haptic feedback. And I mentioned to you, this is a good way to increase immersion. Because we as humans, we have 5 senses, some say 6, right? And these devices, like this one here or the HoloLens, whatever, they have great stereo vision, right? So I can see 3D and I can hear 3D with spatial sound, but there's a few more senses. You know, smell and taste is a little bit harder to simulate, although there are some efforts in that space. But haptic, like touching objects, this is really gaining a lot of traction and we're experimenting quite heavily with it. And here on the top, you can see the gentleman who's wearing this kind of a suit here. It's a full body motion haptic bodysuit. It's called Tesla suit. And you can see the gentleman over there when he's doing the shooting exercise. You can really feel the feedback, right, when he's doing the shooting. And this is really interesting. But of course, you can actually use it for professional things like virtual reality training. And so here we're doing a training for an exhaust welding. And look how he reaches with his arm over this, right? So he really does it like this. He reaches over the exhaust and not just through it, which would be the shorter way to pull the handle, but he reaches over it. And he does this because otherwise he would feel the feedback on his arm, right? So much better and much more realistic. Another device we're using is this one, a WeArt device. It's these kind of small cubes you can put on your fingers, and then you feel the haptic feedback, but also thermal feedback. So you can feel hot and cold. Super cool and increases the immersion. Well, here are some preliminary results. As you can see, total time with haptic disabled is 30 seconds faster than with haptic enabled. And so you might wonder, what? It takes longer with haptics enabled? Is this good? Yes, this is good because users are more careful and they don't memorize wrong paths in the VR training, which they then would apply in the real world, right? So very important and very good to actually use this. If you want to learn more, we released a report about haptic products and haptic feedback devices. So check this out on reply.com. Also, just fresh off the press, if you will, another new report about virtual presence and digital humans we released. Check this out on reply.com. And our overarching kind of Metaverse report we did, which is really cool because it's not just written, made up stuff, but it's actually based on this Sonar platform we have, which is taking analytics data like, patent fillings and whatnot and expert opinions and, put this in one report. So download this as well from reply.com. And last but not least, also a video podcast I'm doing. So what is Meta Minutes? Meta Minutes are short 20 minutes video podcast episodes where I invite guests and we talk about one topic of the Metaverse in an approachable way. And in fact, some of these recordings are actually done in a Metaverse platform. So here you can see the Replay Solar World again. And go check this out. And it's a good show, I think, with a lot of interesting guests. And so Meta Minutes. Just search for it and you will find us. Well, Reply has a bunch of capabilities. We're working with immersive technologies since over a decade now. We have teams all across the globe. We have a bunch of labs where we can experiment and show customers a lot of things. And of course, we have lots of clients where we already built exciting stuff and a lot of partnerships, as you can see here with Microsoft, also very strongly connected. And with this, I say, thanks a lot and have a great, fantastic rest of the Ignite conference and see you soon. Bye-bye.